Here in 2025, conservatism is kind of having a moment, but it took so much work to get here. I think a few years ago, people didn't even realize how radical the left had become. Like whenever there were stories coming about like child transition, people were reluctant to even believe that. But it wasn't until people like my guest started to expose it that things started to change. So it's time to spill some sweet tea. Welcome everybody back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. I'm so glad that you guys are joining us today. This is going to be a really interesting discussion. Some of y'all might even be familiar with my guest. Her name is Vanessa Sivadge. She is the president of Protecting Texas Children. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Yeah, it's truly an honor. Thanks for the invitation.
So I know you've been able to tell your story several times, and I'm so excited to get to hear it from you directly. But she was a pediatric nurse for a while when she was thrust in the depths of gender ideology whenever she exposed the Texas Children's Hospital for illegally using Medicaid funds to fund cross-sex hormone treatments and gender mutilation procedures for minors, which is absolutely insane. And again, this kind of stuff happening in Texas, like I was saying at the beginning, I feel like people were so reluctant to believe that would happen in a state like this. So let's get started.
I agree. Yeah.
What happened?
Yes. Well, it's such an honor to be with you. I've had the privilege over the last almost 10 years of being a nurse, and specifically a pediatric nurse. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and graduated from nursing school in 2015. And a couple of years later, found myself accepting what I thought was going to be my dream job at Texas Children's Hospital. And for your viewers who aren't aware, Texas Children's Hospital is the #1 pediatric hospital in the United States. It is highly prestigious with over 20,000 employees, bringing in over $7 billion in annual revenue. And so anyone who works at this gargantuan medical institution will tell you what an honor and privilege it is to be a part of this team. And that's truly how I felt for a number of years as a nurse. And so really what ended up happening in my story was in 2021, I transitioned into a role at a pediatric multi-specialty clinic. So there were a number of medical clinics operating under one roof. One of those clinics was the endocrinology clinic, under which the gender clinic fell. And so again, this was 2021.
Had the gender clinic been there for a while?
I was I accepted this new role in 2021, so I couldn't tell you what was happening before I started.
Okay.
But that's truly when I noticed a lot of things that were deeply concerning, was very soon after I transitioned into this role. And so there were a number of things that immediately caught my attention. Number one, we would see children who were confused about their sex. And I hesitate even using the word transgender because I don't believe that there is such a thing as a transgender child. I believe that there is male and female, and then there are children who are confused about their sex, and they deserve to find the healing for that confusion, of course. But they were coming into the gender clinic, and I was seeing their interactions with the provider, with the doctor, and they were leaving with a prescription for a cross-sex hormones that would cause irreversible harm to these children. Specifically, what was even more concerning to me was the girls who would come in with so many associated diagnoses, issues like depression, anxiety. Many of them had suffered abuse in their past. Many of them had inflicted self-harm. And so these were devastating stories as a nurse and as someone who has the privilege of caring for and advocating for patients. Piecing together the background and the story of each of these kids that would come in was really difficult for me to grapple with. How I believed that their gender confusion was being exploited, and was ultimately they were being convinced of a lie, that they were born into the wrong body and that a hormone would solve their deep trauma or their pain or their issue. We know now that almost 50% of children who are confused about their sex have admitted to a past of sexual abuse. And so that's one of my one of the goals of our organization at Protecting Texas Children is to advocate for policies that will further examine why children are confused in the first place, is to really get to the root cause of why they're getting to the point where they're so desperate that they're walking into a gender clinic at all. And so anyway, back to my story. All of these things were going on, and I was seeing these interactions from parents, their children being put on a cross-sex hormone, experiencing all of these side effects, all of these issues with these really, really strong medications. And, I think as not just as a nurse, but also as a follower of Christ. I'm a Christian, and I believe unapologetically that Genesis 1 matters, that he created them male and female. And instead of upholding the good design of God that we see in male and female, the hospital was trying to erase the good design of God. And so that I really grappled with that. I really struggled with whether or not I should even stay at my job. I tried applying, I tried leaving, and it just, nothing really, I guess, worked out in the end until I read an article that came out in May of 2023 about an anonymous whistleblower who had come forward to reveal the existence of a secret transgender program at Texas Children's Hospital. And the reason that it was secret was because the hospital had gone to great lengths to conceal and to wipe all traces of the program from their website. And so the public and parents from the outside looking in could not tell that there was a robust transgender program taking place. And the reason that this was happening was because several months prior, our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, had issued a strongly worded opinion in which he stated that any medical institution or hospital that was providing gender-affirming care, which is such a misnomer, I even hate using that terminology, but that they could be investigated for child abuse. And so to shield themselves from liability, the hospital then claimed to the public that they had shut everything down and that their program did not exist, which in fact turned out to be false. Everything was alive and well. And the reason I knew that they had lied was because I was in that clinic where it was taking place. And I realized after I read this courageous whistleblower somewhere within the hospital that had had the courage to come forward to reveal what was happening, that I needed to also do the same thing and affirm what had previously been reported. And so that's exactly what I did in May of 2023. I contacted the journalist. His name is Christopher Rufo. And I provided my testimony as a registered nurse working in this endocrine clinic, in this gender clinic, in which I believed wholeheartedly that they were being manipulated and coerced into an irreversible path of harm.
So whenever you initially accepted the job, did you know that this was that was going to be part of it, like quote unquote treating kids by providing them with cross-sex hormones, or being a part of that process?
I didn't. That's a great question. Again, this was a multi-specialty clinic. And so I was, as a clinic nurse, I was taking care of a number of different specialties, a number of different patients. We had the heart kiddos, we had the GI kiddos, we had all kinds of patients under one roof.
Right.
And so again, it was very much a hush-hush program. And I realized how much of a secret it was once I started.
Yeah, and I know that you'll hear from the left, like, oh, well, like this decision should be made between like the kid, the parents, and their doctors. But whenever the kids go to Houston, like, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever you're going to like these like the hospitals in Houston in general, but like usually that's the first time that the doctors are interacting with these kids, right? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so normally when a child presents to either a pediatrician or a therapist or something like that, maybe even just a school counselor, the pediatrician will refer them to an endocrinologist. And most often it's a doctor who specializes in transgender services. And at that point, for any parent who is well-meaning and who loves their child very deeply, I I believe that parents are misled and manipulated into
Right.
believing that this course of treatment that the transgender provider is presenting before them, they're convinced that this is a life-saving treatment. And if they don't affirm their child's false identity, that their child will harm themselves or commit suicide. And so I believe that for any parent who hears those words coming from a doctor, that it becomes very difficult to ascertain if that is actually true or not, because no parent wants to be responsible for their child harming themselves. And so
Right.
it's
And the
emotional
reason
blackmail.
and the reason you're seeking medical attention to begin with is because it's like not within your realm of expertise. So you try to
Right.
seek guidance from someone who theoretically should be looking out for your harm and has signed a Hippocratic oath and all of those kinds of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then also like around because I think it was around 2021 when we first started seeing these like initial leaks that people were reluctant to believe. But one of the things that a lot of parents have reported is that like doctors would say, well, do you want to have a dead daughter or a live son? And
Yeah.
frame it in that kind of way. But I'm curious. So you said that like you decided to speak up. You thought that that was important. What happened after that?
Exactly. So thankfully, a couple of days later, in May of 2023, the Texas legislature voted to pass SB 14, which, because of the testimony of this anonymous whistleblower just a few days prior, revealing the existence of this transgender program, there were numerous Democrat legislators here in Austin who flipped their votes to vote in favor of SB 14. And so it was just a remarkable step in the right direction. And so a couple of days later, that legislation passed. And so I went back to work believing that things would get better, that this program was officially going to, end once and for all. And so 2 months later, in July of 2023, I was at home with my husband and we were having dinner, and there was a knock on the front door. And, my husband and I go to answer the door. This is a random Monday evening. And there were 2 federal agents that were at my front door asking to speak with me about issues at my work. And they flashed their badges and they said they were from the FBI and that they had a couple of questions, and proceeded to inform me that they had come to my home, number one, because they knew of my beliefs against gender-affirming care, and because I was a person of interest in an investigation targeting a whistleblower. Except they didn't use the word whistleblower, they used the term leaker. And in their words, this leaker had violated the law by releasing patient confidential information to the public, so had broken HIPAA. And they wanted to recruit my help in order to expose the identity of this other whistleblower. And a couple of things just kind of flashed through my mind in that moment. Number one, I knew that they were lying to me because this anonymous whistleblower had not revealed any confidential patient information to the public.
Right.
Everything had been very carefully redacted. But I believe that the FBI was using that narrative to try to intimidate me into aiding their investigation. And they issued a series of threats. They said that they could make my life very difficult if I didn't comply. They said that, my safety and my career were at risk if I did not collaborate with them. And so it was just a shocking interaction, something that you never think will happen to you. You always think, well, this happens in China and in North Korea, and you read about situations like this in other countries, but you never think that this will come to your door. And it dawned on me that instead of investigating an institution, a medical institution, for hiding their crime, for concealing their crime, they're investigating the pediatric nurse who exposed the crime. And that is such the opposite of what should have happened in that situation. And so, my husband and I, we had a decision to make, and we could either cooperate with this investigation, or we could not. And so, we read a verse in Ephesians 5 that was deeply meaningful to us. And it says to take no part in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness, but instead expose them. For everything exposed by the light becomes visible. And so I think the enemy loves to keep you in a place of fear and anxiety. And there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of unknowns in a situation like this. But I think we decided in that moment to instead make decisions from a place of faith and conviction, knowing that what I had done was right and that I had absolutely no regrets of anything I had done or said up until that point. And instead that we were going to ultimately come forward publicly to talk about what had happened and, in our view, how the federal government had massively overreached and, come to the home of a private citizen, all for expressing my views in alignment with my faith, ultimately. And so that's exactly what I did a couple of months later in going public.
Yeah. And your story really does highlight different levels of corruption. So like at the beginning talking about like the doctors and like that kind of perverse thing in the ways that they were influencing parents to have their kids make those like radical changes to their bodies, all the way through like this big healthcare system, specifically in Texas. And then the fact that it's something that's bleeding into like, or was already rooted in the federal government, where everyone had been like, I don't know if like brainwashed is the right word, or radicalized, if you will, to like believe that those kinds of things, and that's like the acceptable position for where the government and like what their proper role is. And I think that really does kind of remind us as conservatives right now. I feel like there's a lot of victories that are happening, and it seems like we're kind of have a little bit of momentum, but it does kind of also show us how much there is that's still left to do, and how much work there is, and what needs to be done. Actually, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, during the Texas Policy Summit about a month ago, whenever this comes out, also announced that we have something now called the Family Success Agenda, and we're going to be engaging a lot.
That's
a lot with that more.
Yeah.
But I'm also glad there's groups like yours that are coming up as well at the same time to try to, again, it's a huge issue on all different levels of government and working together to build that up.
Yeah.
So what does Protecting Texas Children do, or how did you get it started?
Yeah. I'm very excited. So to wrap up the story here, I ended up coming forward publicly in June of 2024, and I showed that the hospital had not only engaged in a pattern of secrecy with concealing this transgender program, but that they were also illegally billing Texas Medicaid to cover cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers for children. And that has been illegal per the Texas Medicaid policy for almost 10 years. And so not only were they illegally billing Medicaid, but they had also intentionally misdiagnosed these children for the purpose of justifying those treatments. So there's just
Wait,
so
what do you
many
mean by
layers.
misdiagnosed? What happened?
Yeah, it's just really corrupt how creative the hospital was becoming in concealing all of this. But essentially what would happen is a child would come into the gender clinic, and in order to avoid detection by these insurance companies, the hospital would first label the sex on file on the medical chart of the patient as the preferred identity of the child, not as their given biological sex as they were born. So if a female would come in and she was transitioning into a male identity, the sex on file would be listed as male, even though this girl was born a female. So that's the first, lie. The second level of that, the second layer of that, is that then this child, in order to receive estrogen treatments, let's say this is a biological male, born male, the diagnosis on file would read estrogen deficiency. And so that would then justify the doctor prescribing estrogen as a hormone, which is of course ridiculous because there's no biological male that needs exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of the short version of how the hospital was avoiding detection and ultimately committing fraud.
That's just insanely corrupt to think about, like the levels that you have to go through to be able to get there. So with like Texas session in 2023, like you were talking about, was it SB 14, right? That
Yes,
passed. So what work is left to be done, and then what is Protecting Texas Children doing about it?
absolutely. Yeah. So, 2 months later, I actually was fired from my position for blowing the whistle. And so, obviously, that was illegal for a number of reasons. Whistleblowers have protections in the state of Texas, which the hospital conveniently ignored. And I was fired, in violation of the law. And so I've retained attorneys to help fight this discrimination. Ultimately, it's discrimination in the workplace. Um, but to answer your question, I'm very excited because I've just launched a new advocacy organization called Protecting Texas Children. And this is just a continuation of my efforts to protect kids. Now it just looks a little bit different. I'm here in Austin advocating for good legislation and good policies that will further enshrine the mental, emotional, psychological protections for kids. And so we do that in 4 key areas. We oppose harmful gender ideologies. Specifically, now a huge push is the stopping the social transitioning of children. Medical transition for kids is obviously now illegal thanks to SB 14, but it always starts with the social aspect. We have adults that are brainwashing and indoctrinating kids and convincing them by using their preferred pronouns, by letting them change into different clothes at school. And that's ultimately leads to a child wanting to, take all the hormones that we're seeing in the hospitals. So it always starts with the social piece, which is a huge emphasis for us this session. And we also advocate for policies against the sexualization, the exploitation of kids, of course. And then, like I said earlier, I'm really passionate about exploring the why behind why a child is confused. So, advocating for good, sound mental health that will actually correct the underlying cause of a child's confusion. And ultimately, we just want to strengthen the nuclear family, supporting moms who've chosen life for their babies, advocating for policies that will decrease the tax burden on families. So those are just a few of our priorities.
I love that your focus at the end of the day comes back to the family and building up from there. Do you think that there's been a change in the atmosphere of Texas and being receptive to like both like more family oriented policy, or even like being aware of like quote unquote trans kids and some of the issues involved with that?
I do. And I think, again, it starts from the top all the way down. So President Trump has been such a key advocate and a voice in this issue with his executive order. In the very first week of his presidency, he made very clear that there is only male and female. And so he's such a strong leader in that regard. And then here in Texas, in Austin, I'm very excited, enthusiastic, and supporting a number of key pieces of legislation that protect kids from being exposed to porn in schools, from just the graphic novels that still exist in school libraries. Like there's a lot of key legislation that hopes to completely do away with that. And so I think that we have a lot of momentum on our side, that there's a lot of enthusiasm to continue defending kids.
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely seen a change from I started college in 2018, and at that time I feel like it was just beginning, or you were just beginning to see a few people online who are less known talk about the problem with like child gender transition, but for like a wide part, even people on the right were reluctant to believe that it was actually happening or a problem at all. So I've been making videos kind of exposing different like, do you remember the James Younger case in situation in Texas where he like his dad was affirming that he like his both of his twin sons were sons, but the mom wanted
Yeah, there's been
him to
so
be
many
a
devastating
girl, right?
stories.
But
Yeah,
back from that, and that didn't have as much momentum at the time. But
right.
seeing that shift from even like 2021 to the 2023 session, and that change in like legislators realizing, oh, this isn't just like some fringe thing that like happens in one case. This is something that's systematic, that's become a part of the culture. And if we don't change something about it, we're not going to be the Texas that we once were.
Yeah, it's It's just wild how, I mean, so many people have come together. There's such a coalition. People from the right, people from the center, and now people from the left, that this issue has unified and brought together so many people from polar ends of the political spectrum, because we all agree, like, this was not a controversial thing 10 or 20 years ago to say that boys should be boys, should be raised as boys, and girls should be raised as girls, and that they cannot become the opposite of what they were born to be. And that should not be controversial. It should be.
Or the big one, I think, for some, like, especially moms, was, no, I don't want a grown man in the bathroom with my daughter.
Yes. Yes. And that's like a very common sense thing that I feel not like now so many people have come together to really talk about that.
You talked about like actually like leaning back and relying on your faith in difficult time. So I want to know, how does that increase the hope that you have that things will change in Texas?
Yeah, I always say, like, people ask me often, like, how did you find the courage to come forward, and how did you overcome the fear of the unknown? And I always just say, like, God just will equip you with the courage if you step forward in obedience. That our calling as Christians is to be obedient to what God has called us to do. Ephesians 2 says that we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared beforehand. And so that speaks to our identity, that speaks to our calling. And there were some moments where I was deeply scared about the future, and I didn't know what the future would hold. But I knew that God would equip me with that courage when the time came. And that's exactly what he did. And so I have no regrets. I'm so deeply passionate about this organization that we've launched. And now I'm thrilled to be here advocating for kids.
So if people want to be able to find what you're doing, see if they can get involved in some way, where can they find you and how can they help?
Yeah, absolutely. You can visit our website and sign up for our newsletter, www.protectingtexaschildren.com, and sign up for our newsletter, follow us on the socials, and I would love to get you more connected.
That's amazing. And then one final question. I feel like this issue in particular demonstrates the way that younger women are so easily led by fear, being self-conscious. In what ways can women start to step up with confidence and I guess be the change that they want to create in the world around them?
Yeah, I think a really easy first step is to find people that you align with. Find a community of people who are already kind of in the fight. And I think that courage is contagious, as they say. And when you see someone else stepping out with that conviction, that will ignite something inside of you, and you will then be propelled to do the same. And then, the issues could be different. It could be something completely different that you're passionate about. But I think it's so helpful to find a community of people to kind of link arms with.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree. I feel like that's been true for my life, helping me stay motivated, and for us in the fight to have people to link arms with. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you're another organization that can be part of the coalition to link arms with.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming here today to be able to speak about this issue, and for being brave and stepping up. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining the Sweet Tea series today. I hope that you live your life with courage.